Siddharth Deshmukh wears multiple hats. He's a teacher, a marketer, an administrator, an entrepreneur, a podcaster, all rolled into one. He's known as a traveling professor, and true to his word, he was in the UK when we recorded this episode sitting here in Pune. He teaches at institutions like FLAME and MICA and runs a podcast called Smarter with Sid. His areas of interest are business transformation through digital, customer experience design, and digital futures. So we decided to pick his brains about how to stay relevant in an increasingly digital future. We spoke about the mindsets and changes required to thrive in a digital future. Who should be happy and who should be worried about a digital future? The business opportunities in a digital future, and how can senior leaders deal with new media literacy? Siddharth had some interesting insights on curiosity, homeostasis, and the future of work. There's a lot to unpack here. So go on and get smarter with Sid in this CTQ Smart. Welcome, Siddharth. Welcome to this CTQ Smartcast.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Doing good, thanks, Siddharth. So you being a professor and all that, we're not going to get started with an easy one. It's going to be as tough as it can get. So what do you know about digital futures that others don't?
Wow, that is straight into it's like a bouncer first ball, yeah. Okay, hello. So look, I actually think that what I know is that eventually digital has to be used by human beings. And what is really interesting is that it seems as if human beings are evolving in an unnatural way to adopt to digital. So, like for example, when you're swiping left and swiping right on Tinder, okay, that is intuitive behavior. Where has this come from? And that is a very different perspective on a digital future. This actually means that human beings have the ability, genetically maybe, or maybe biologically, let's say, okay, before I step onto scientific toes, biologically to actually adapt to this technological change much quicker. And we are seeing this with younger and younger generations. So if I look at why this happens, there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is, okay, actually, you know what? It is going to be, each generation is going to be there. We are already, it's programmed within us to be accepting of technology. That's how we started with the axe and the chisel and all of that. And now that's how we are doing. The second thing is more nefarious, which is like, actually we are kind of co-opting technology, and this is the next stage of evolution. Okay, so there's a wonderful book, I forgot the author's name, it's called What Technology Wants, as if technology is a sentient being of its own, and it's like kind of co-opting humanity into becoming something else. So that's like that adaptation thing. So those are the kind of ways in which, if one starts looking at a digital future, you start seeing things from a completely new light. That's when it makes sense for Gen Z to be so rapid into thumb texting, for example. It certainly makes a lot of sense. So I think that's maybe the angle that I come from a biological angle.
Oh, nice. Great. So, the thing with digital future is that, again, the standard thing about future is just unevenly distributed. It's already there and all of that is there. But there's a lot of this influence from popular culture, right? You see movies like Terminator or, back in the day, the 2001 Space Odyssey and all these things. There's this extreme that is portrayed. You also have this idea of singularity and all of that, which sometimes is scary. Elon Musk is talking about his own version of some people call it scaremongering, but things are moving at a gradual pace as well. Gradual in the sense that before you realize, things are becoming more and more digital. So that's the space that we wanted to talk more about. And since at CTQ we are always talking about future relevance. So how do you stay relevant in this future in the near term, right? So that is what I wanted to focus on in this conversation. So one question that came to mind was, the digital future is inevitable, right? The transition to digital future seems to be inevitable right now. So what kind of roles and people in those roles should be very happy about a digital future, and who should be really scared?
Yeah, I think I get a lot of this from my students. They want to prepare for a digital future, and they're like, so what should we be doing? And how should we prepare? And to be honest, I think if I look at what is core to be human, okay, is to maybe be creative, tell stories, see patterns, and look at the narrative behind patterns, right? I think those are core skills for any human being, because you're human. That's how what differentiates you from the rest of animals. So I think that is something which, if you have as an intuitive skill or something that you're willing to learn, both are possible. I think that should make you happy. If you're very intuitively good at it, or if you're happy to learn it, you should be happy with it. um, People keep talking of numbers, but I'm not sure, because I think that if you're looking at artificial intelligence, then you're looking at the ability to crunch numbers. So any person who has the ability to create a story can look at numbers and look at the narrative behind numbers. Can artificial intelligence also create a story? Yes, that's also possible. So at one level, we should all be scared. but but maybe the storytellers can be lesser scared than other people. So also another way of looking at it is, what part of ourselves are we outsourcing to technology already?
Hmm.
So we are outsourcing all of our memory, right? We are outsourcing all of, so the fact is that if we are outsourcing all of that, then it means that, so then what remains behind?
Hmm.
Right. So what remains behind? And if you do the whole Buddhist neti neti thing, or whatever, I don't know whether it's Buddhist or Vedic or whatever, if you do the neti neti thing, you will suddenly realize that what remains with you is the ability to consciously create. Okay, to consciously create, to be innovative, and these are all cliched terms, but if you go at it from a different perspective, just what can I outsource rather than anything else, you soon realize that there is very few things that you can't outsource.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So I'll pose this question back to you. What are the things that you are currently outsourcing, and what do you think you will remain doing for the next whatever 30, 40 years?
I think over a period of time, I have shifted from being an entrepreneur to an academic associated with one institute, to being the traveling professor, and then being a content creator as well, right? So what I've realized is that intuitively I have taken a journey wherein I have outsourced a lot of things which are in administration and in management to be purely into creation and research. So when I look at what is happening, that is what I have outsourced. What I've outsourced perhaps is administration. What I've outsourced perhaps is management, in a sense, as typically understood. What I have embraced is content creation at all levels.
Right. So you were doing gig economy much before the term became fashionable.
Yes. Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. That's why you get burnt. But yes.
Right. So again, at the heart of this, Siddharth, is the fact that you were ready to embrace this change. It
Hmm.
would have required some degree of change of mindset, right? That
Hmm.
traditionally this is how things have been. You've been associated as an academician with one institute. If you are teaching, you're not really, running a business of your own. This is how things have been, at least in India, right? But then you had to make a change. So was that easy? Was that difficult? Did it come naturally to you? Was that a leap of faith? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I was always intuitively unhappy with the way in which the world is structured around business, which was
Right.
around a 9 to 5 corporate gig, or being an entrepreneur and starting up and struggling, and all of that, or being an academic and then being in your own ivory tower. So those were the words that I was seeing, and I was wondering whether how do I disrupt it, and it's a matter of timing. I'm saying that I always had it. I was always trying. I was always, so all my failed attempts are not visible for the world to see.
Right.
Right, right. So that is certainly works in my favor. So I wish I could say, I'm so intelligent, I did this. But the fact is that I kept failing, but I kept struggling because I was not happy. So it was not about, coming from a place of, oh, I see this. I know that there's something intrinsically wrong. It's like that pebble in your shoe that you're irritated with all the time. And for some of us, we can live with it. For most of us, actually, we can live with it. I could not live with it, so I had to take the pebble out and see what was happening. So that leap of faith has always happened for me from time to time, and that has helped me stay a little bit ahead of the curve. Not too much, little bit ahead.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Right, right. So, what I'm hearing is also that you basically did a lot of experiments.
Hmm.
A lot of
Hmm.
them failed. You learned from them, took all that learning, and, now you're able to reap the benefits of all those, past experiments. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
I think that what you said in the earlier part is absolutely correct. Now,
Hmm.
whether I'm successful right now is a matter of relativity, and
Sure.
what is going to happen in the future may also involve failure. Right? We may also involve failure, which might be a little more public, which might be over the not below the radar, over the radar. That's all. But the process remains the same of failing, trying, continuing, trying to succeed, getting. And sometimes you reach scale and then you grow a little, but then again there is a problem. So
Correct.
I think it's a fairly cyclical thing.
Right, right. So, any recommendations for people from different backgrounds on how should they think about, changing their mindset, the kind of habits, routines that they can build, even the
Hmm.
content they, should consume, so that they can flourish in such a digital future.
I think the most important thing that I've realized myself is that if I look at, I mean, I don't know if you remember TikTok, but
Hmm.
if you look at TikTok, you will see that it's built like a Las Vegas casino,
Hmm.
which means that you lose sense of time and space. And so therefore you actually say, oh shit, I spent about half an hour without realizing it, right? Which essentially means that we are kind of in a boundaryless world wherein we are doing work and yet consuming content. And so it's become kind of fluid. And we have no concept of how do I actually deal with this fluidity. So, which is, I think, where we need to be a little wiser and start identifying some personal boundaries. So, it is a little like us realizing, damn, why am I fat? Oh, I'm fat because I've eaten McDonald's for the whole year. Of course, I'm going to be fat. Of course, I'm going to, have issues with my health and stuff like that. I'm not fat shaming anybody, but I'm just using that as an example. Now, the fact is that if I look at we are all consuming this information as junk without putting any personal boundaries. And because we are not really putting any personal boundaries to it, the first step would be to do that. And so how do I put these personal boundaries in place? I think it depends upon how you are as a person. If you have the ability to deconstruct space, do that. If you have the ability to deconstruct time, do that. Like, for example, if you say, okay, in this room I am productive, in this room I am going to be entertained, that's space. Or if you have the ability to say, for the next half an hour I do this, for the next half an hour, so choose what works best for you, is what I would say. But do have personal boundaries. Understand that all information is not equally good, because we seem to be hardwired to get information. So we are eating and we think it's amazing in information. So yeah, so less junk food, please. Less McDonald's.
Yeah, so we actually have this idea of a curiosity diet. We
Hmm.
take the notion of a thali and
Yeah.
we say that you need everything. You need your proteins,
Hmm. Hmm.
vegetables. You also
Hmm.
need your dessert, right? You can't leave that as if that's not something which I want to
No.
avoid
Yeah.
completely. That's
Yeah.
that's not sustainable in the long run. So you
Yeah.
want everything, but you need to be judicious about ensuring that all the items are there.
Love this idea of a curiosity diet. I don't know who came up with it, but it's a great idea, because it also. But I don't think we are curious. I think we actually eat it as if it is automation. So we are a lot of times we are doing stuff without the curiosity element. We are doing stuff. When we are eating the thali, we are eating it mechanically. The law of diminishing marginal utility perhaps comes and plays its part. But the fact is that I'm just saying, maybe do it with consciousness, and maybe you
Right.
don't need the thali. Maybe you need something else for the day.
Right. Yeah. I think that let's unpack that bit about curiosity that you just mentioned. Why would you say that people are not that curious? I mean, are you saying that they're not curious now, or as adults? Let's just unpack that a bit.
Okay, so I know that's a trope that a child is always curious, and as adults we lose, and there's some
Right.
truth to that, because that's why it becomes a cliche or a trope. But what I want to focus on is, let's ask ourselves, why are we resist curiosity? Instead of saying why should we not be more curious, let's ask ourselves, is there a benefit? And there is a big benefit. The big benefit is that by not being curious, we are creating certainty. We create, and it may be a fake certainty, it may be an egoic certainty, it might be actual certainty of physical life, but we love certainty. And that is how our institutions function. I know, I'm certain that there is going to be a bank tomorrow, right? Which is certainty. So if I'm curious, will the bank exist tomorrow, then I'm jacked, right? So the fact is that I think that is the inherent thing. So therefore, we are inherently making everything as certain as possible in our lives, and that, but we don't do it consciously. We do it unconsciously because it is programmed in us to make everything certain. So if we are able to then identify things that you need not be certain about, I think that probably will help. That's the first step.
Okay, so this is a very interesting line of thought. So now imagine there is this other parallel that we have, which is the world around us. Like you said, where things are changing, right? Whether you want it or whether you like it or not, the world around us is highly uncertain. So then, how should people balance the two? Is there something that they can do to sort of make peace with both the things? Because like you said, it is natural for you to keep things stable, right? Homeostasis is how we live, right? We want things to be stable, but
Absolutely.
the world is changing. So how do you then make peace with the two?
I think you don't. I think I don't think we are supposed to be in a state of peace. I think we are supposed to be in a state of being mildly agitated about things. I don't think happiness and peace are very long-lasting constructs. So therefore, one of the best things that we can hope for is to actually look at a state of feeling meaning or feeling purpose, even though I am suffering. So I think if that tends to be there, then you will be able to accept certainty and accept uncertainty with a little bit of equanimity, if I may say so.
Right.
But fact is that how do I make peace with it? You struggle through it, I think. And then that's how it's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl's book, or if, since you are in the UK right now, the lines at Wimbledon, you have to treat both like the imposters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So Siddharth, just going forward, we are talking about a digital future, right?
Sure.
Another thing that I see as a response to these lines of thought about digital futures and all, is people feel that, oh, we've been in the knowledge economy for some time, right? So people think and assume that they are native to this digital future that we are talking about. Is that true? B, is there further distance that this whole digital future is going to go, where these people may not be that comfortable, or may feel as natives in that future? What is your take on that?
I'll give two examples. One is, as a professor, a lot of professors actually struggled through the pandemic because they thought that they were in the knowledge economy, but they realized that they have to move from being a theater artist to a film artist, which involves a completely different set of communication skills and abilities to actually deliver whatever content they are trying to deliver as a lecture. So I don't think that it is going to spare the so-called knowledge workers. Right, all of us are going to have this avalanche of changes from a technological perspective, and that's only increasing. So that's the first example that I'd like to give in the deconstruction of the knowledge economy. Right. The second is, just imagine that you do a podcast, I do a podcast, and we think, wow, podcast, that is, amazing. And then sure, you have a clubhouse, and sure, you have this, and that's also cool. But if virtual reality confronts us day after tomorrow,
Right.
and everyone gets into Oculus Rift, and imagine that we have to have the same conversation that we are having, but by wearing and meeting each other's avatars. How is that conversation going to be like? So I would say we are not prepared for it. We don't know. So therefore, even if you are at the so-called cutting edge of things, okay, you are, my friend, you are as jacked as the rest of the rest of us, right? Because that's how the world is going to go.
Right. Yeah. So be humble, be prepared, and keep experimenting.
Absolutely, I suppose so. Be humble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about humbleness. Sometimes, you see so many humble brags on LinkedIn that I have given up on humility as a virtue. I hate it when they say humble to do this. Humble. यार तू humble नहीं है, तू proud है. Oh, no, proud है.
Yeah, we spoke to somebody who's written a book about learning, and he was talking about intellectual humility. And he said, yeah, I think I realized that that's a much better term to use.
That's a good term. That's a good term. Intellectual humility. Yeah, much better.
Right. So, and you've also done a lot of work in digital transformation. So what do you think are the business opportunities waiting to be exploited as more and more businesses sort of undergo digital transformation?
Yeah, no, I think that there are two kinds of changes, the disruptive changes and incremental changes. I think any legacy company is looking at incremental changes because they can't handle disruptive changes. I think that, so let's talk of legacy companies first, right? I think what probably is extremely important is to figure out, how, first let's look at areas. First is obviously virtual reality and augmented reality is certainly an area or a sector. The second, or two sectors rather, the second could be, if you see the changes, the way in which we are consuming sports as entertainment, e-gaming becomes huge. Okay. The third is certainly in the whole area of pharmaceuticals and medicine, and and that part. Obviously, people keep talking about blockchain and all of that, so I'm not even getting there. So these are the usual sort of answers that you will get when you're asked a question like this. I think what becomes extremely important for us to understand is that an organization is also an illusion. Right. So if I look at an organization, any kind of organization, it's an illusion, or at best, it is an artifact. Okay. It is what I would call, from a biological perspective, an extended phenotype. So, like phenotype, a nest is an extended phenotype of a bird, right? So a bird, because a bird knows, human beings know how to create institutions and organizations. So if you see the world around you, it is just your biology in action. You're seeing your own stuff as an extended phenotype. So now you have to ask yourself, if we are hurtling in the future, will a nest be sufficient, or what is actually going to be required? If like, for example, if there is no tree, then there is no nest. So I think the need of the hour is for us to move beyond survival and growth, because those are the metrics that each of, to one of adaptation. So when I say adaptation, it means that I have to be completely different, have different metrics, okay, I identify different purposes, understand how to return value to shareholders and all of that completely differently from the way in which I'm doing right now. Right now, I'm saying my X has become 10X. That is why invest in me at any sort of thing. And that is that I've survived and I'm succeeding, and these are my growth metrics. I think those themselves are going to be questioned. So if we start questioning those themselves, and you are seeing early signs of it, like thrift stores, for example, or marketplaces wherein different things happen, or the concept of degrowth or environmental concerns, or whatever it is, those are different metrics. And imagine a extended phenotype, an organization built on these different matrices, then you have the ability to actually look at a different future. So I would, whenever I'm going into an organization, I would actually say, how are you going to adapt? Rather than how can you survive and succeed?
Right.
How are you going to adapt? I think that is the need of the hour.
So is there something that you see in organizations? Is there something in their kernel in terms of, what makes it easier for some organizations to adapt better to changes?
I think there are very few organizations that have actually adapted to different situations. Right? And there's a very good reason why. I mean, one is that when you're in startup mode, you're driven by your business model. But when you go into scale up mode, or even when you're trying to turn things around, or just trying to just do a little realignment, then you're trying to make changes to the operational model as well, rather than only the business model. So if I look at the business model is driven in startup area or even scaling area, is driven by the founder's vision or the founder's कुछ तो चमका है आगे जा रहे हैं. So that is what is happening. So then the whole organization is created around this sort of direction or vision, whatever it is. But as things progress, I think people find it damn difficult to move from one mindset to the other and to the other. So even in a digital, non-digital future, people find it difficult to change the rules of the game when the game is being played.
Right. Is it also a question of scale? With the number of people, you then, as you're growing, you want to then organize them according to departments, and like you said, you have these internal metrics. Now suddenly you're saying, oh no, you're not playing cricket anymore, you're actually playing football, so you're going to be measured differently.
Yeah, no, I think certainly one of the big factors that makes a difference from a startup that is trying to scale is the scale thing. And it actually connects back to biology and maybe Dunbar's number. So if I look at 150 and the impact that I can have, the meaningful relationships, etc. So let's not belabor that. What also actually becomes possible is that if you look at Harley Davidson, didn't really scale, got wiped out in India. Why? Right. So it's not necessarily only scale that is creating the problem. It is the fact that, the scenario completely changed, wherein the value system of their target audience, because the target audience was evolving or being replaced by a new set of people who were having a different value system, just completely threw Harley Davidson out of the water. And so therefore it can very well be just an evolving target group, or it can very well be something else. We don't know, is what I'm saying. We tend to be very linear in our thinking, but it's not necessarily a linear thing.
Right. Yeah. So sorry for interrupting. You were going to make it two parts. First was legacy companies. What about?
So when you're looking at let's say startups, I think the case for building a startup which is sort of in the red ocean or a Me Too is rapidly decreasing because of the way in which you see consolidation is happening and stuff like that. I think it is very difficult for a startup to say, yes, I am another digital agency, for example, and my differentiation is I've got this framework. Okay, so that I think is a loser model to start with. Don't do that unless and until you just want a lifestyle business. But if you're trying to create a business which is inherently adaptable and scalable, then you have to be very disruptive, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. Then there will be a period of stability when something else happens. But right now, I don't think we are going to look at yet another education startup or yet another digital agency. because we have a lot of them already. We have a lot of them.
Hmm.
And so I think that the time is ripe for some massive disruptions to happen.
Right. Any examples that come to mind? You wish this was the disruption that was happening in a space?
Okay, so let's look at the content creation space, for example. Yeah, right now there is a business model involved for the topmost podcasters, topmost YouTube creators, etc. Everybody else makes minuscule money and is not really in it for making money or whatever it is. Now, there are some of them who are literally at the bottom of the pile, and there are some of them who are middle roaders, but there's no business model around the middle roaders. There's nothing. So I wish I can see something. So now that means that, okay, clients and agencies have to actually look at content creators who are middle of the roaders differently, which means that they have to look at micro influencers differently from actual influencers. So that requires a different kind of thing. So there is a disruption possibility over there.
Right.
For example.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I can vouch for that because we have actually been trying to look for these middle road podcasters to actually do some, actually go and give some money to them.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So we're actually struggling to find them. So yeah.
It is a problem.
Yes, that is anything else that comes to mind outside of this? You also from your educational background, as does that
I think
seem
education,
like a
in education, if you take the space of the need, I think has shifted from, or is there currently, the need is either to get a degree or to get a certification and continuous certifications and all of that. And there are a lot of good players in that. Upgrad is one, Simply Learn, etc., etc. Fantastic. But we are forgetting that there is an emerging market which is based upon I need to actually survive, succeed, and adapt in my day-to-day job without getting a certification. Gaya bhad mein, mujhe actually सीखना hai, okay, in order to be acknowledged.
right.
Now, I think clients, even big companies like Google, are beginning to, and Facebook and whatever, beginning to pay lesser attention to degrees and certifications and on the fact that, do you know something? Can you bring a different perspective? So there is a need for continuous learning without the certifications and degrees involved. Now, it's never going to be in the short term as big as the other two markets, but it's an emerging market. And that is going to increase as learning over the life cycle of a career becomes a thing. And so therefore, I think that is a great opportunity for a disruptor in the education space.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned about content creation. If you just look at another kind of content creation, right? Say you look at all these AI based tools. Now you have AI based tools, so practically all creating all kinds of content. You can create Google ads, blog posts, the benefit statements. So now these some of these apps have actually become legit team members of the marketing team, right? So how should marketers think about working with non-human teammates? How should they be making sure that they're actually flourishing as a whole and getting the best out of these non-human agents or whatever you want to call them?
I think I would look at it with caution. Two ways. Okay, so if I have to be a conspiracy theorist, what I would say is, damn it, after 100 years, these things are going to become sentient, not just intelligent. And so therefore, please behave with them politely and quietly. Your Siri is going to whack your face otherwise. So that is one. But conspiracy theories aside, I think that the automation thing that I spoke of becomes incredibly evident in an area which is rife with templatization of creatives. So I would approach the whole thing with caution, because if everyone is preparing the same kind of template, you are not going to end up actually selling anything to anybody. Right. If everyone wears a pair of jeans, nobody is a rebel. You know what I'm saying? So the fact is that if I was in somebody's place, I would use my very human, very fragile, very flawed mind to create something first and then see what the automated thing is giving me. And then the objective to see what works better. Because as a human being, I know how to connect with another human being. I should not lose that out. It's the fear that I have today when I go and see a Google Maps, right? So therefore, I'm not paying attention to the street. So I have lost all the cues that come from a street. So I'm losing a little bit of my humanity whenever I'm checking the Google Maps. I'm a little afraid of that. I'm not sure whether that's the right thing to be doing or the wrong thing to be doing. It is fantastic. It is amazing. It allows us to, do crazy things, but not at the cost of my humanity.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing here is don't again going back to your line about what should be outsourced and what should
Yeah.
not be.
Yeah.
So get things done.
Yeah.
Don't be scared about it, but also retain your own value in the whole.
So try
space, right?
yourself out first. Be a little, try it out. Don't be lazy.
Hmm.
Don't have inertia.
Hmm.
Don't be on automaton, right? Do something first and then see what works.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And again, we spoke about marketers. If we just extend this to organizations and business leaders, right? In an increasingly digital future, how should leaders be thinking about their human capital? I mean, we spoke about marketing, but again, there are spaces where entire divisions can now be replaced by bots or robots, algorithms. So how should they be thinking? And how do all these, things like what we call this, we have come up with this term called empowered employees, right? People who are a lot more vocal about what they want now. They are aware of, what is there. The whole freelancer economy, generalist versus specialist, distributed work, all these things are also now important factors. How should leaders be thinking about, their human capital?
I think the film industry has given us an amazing model for leaders to think about human capital. Because what is happening is that actors come, there's a director, there's a producer, there's script writing, all of that. So there's a sequence, there's parallel activities, everything is planned. It's a project, it's an experiment actually. Whenever you're creating a film, it's an experiment. It might work, might not work, but there is a business model attached to it, all of that. And it works. The thing is disbanded, the team goes off, and then some other factors come in, there are teams. I see more of that future happening for leaders to contend with. Now, does that mean that the old thing is all completely gone? That those 20-year, periods that you were spending in one organization completely gone? No. So you have to deal with it like a mix and match, a hybrid sort of situation. What is important is for a company man, I would say, who's somebody who's been in an organization for a long period of time, to recognize how the world is changing around them. What tends to happen is otherwise we go into our own bubbles.
Right.
So the guy in the gig economy thinks everything is a gig. The guy in the corporate thing, thinks that everything has to run according to a very linear process. And I think that if you are able to actually understand, okay, if as a company, because I'm the guy who is holding the power to change an organization. So that becomes extremely important. I think we are all stuck to relics of the past,
right,
in terms of because of the whole certainty thing that I was talking about. So the more we question it, the better. The more conscious we become of it, the more aware we become of it, I think the better it is for us.
Right, right. It's interesting. You talk about the Hollywood project film crew, kind of a thing. Hollywood also had these studios back in the early 1900s where people would be employed by studios, but then they would come together to form a crew for a particular film, right? So that's an interesting notion to bring here again.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a hybrid nature there as well. There was a hybrid nature.
Right. And this was before 1950, right?
Exactly.
So we are actually going back.
Exactly. It's a good model to experiment with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So another interesting thing to think about is that, especially in a country like India, right? I mean, you have these startups and legacy companies now trying to digitize and transform and all of that. There are some parts of their ecosystem or supply chain are still in the older world. In fact, some of the regulatory bodies and government still remains in the, in some parts remains in the, older time, almost anachronistic, right? So, and sometimes they're even like struggling to even want to change. So how do you see this playing out in a country like India, and what are the ramifications of it?
Very messily. The short answer. Because we are not like China. In the
Right.
sense, with China, they decided no to internet-based e-commerce, consumer e-commerce, and they said we don't give a shit about what happens to your market share. Everything goes down because we've seen that these are the things that we want to go ahead with as a society. So China has the ability, because over there, government, business, and everything, for whatever reason, is aligned. But in a democracy, it doesn't work that way. In a democracy, we stumble towards a solution rather than, work like a, coordinated effort. So whatever democracy it may be, whether it is India or the UK or the US or a lot of parts of the world, you are going to stumble towards a solution. And the thing that I keep thinking about, especially when you think of governments and all of that, is technology is always one step ahead than government, and everybody tries to catch up. Now, there's a reason for that. The reason is that each government is bound by constitutions. The constitutions are written in, Baba Adam ke zamane pe. So actually, those constitutions themselves are losing relevance over a period of time. Now, what I'm saying is it might be extremely offensive to people because they believe in their country's constitution, this, that, and the other. But I believe that a constitution is a set of rules created for a certain scenario. And if that certain scenario was created at a certain point in time, we have to revisit and have version 1.1, version 1.2 of the constitution all the time. Now, of course, that is rife with danger because it can be colored by a certain perspective, or it can be as liberal or as conservative or whatever it may be, right? But there is no requirement. See, organizations are better than governments because organizations at least change their operational models. They change their organization structure and all of that. There is knowledge about, say, let's say Dunbar's number or whatever, and people say, okay, 150 ho gaya, to, let's do something else. Let's have a different structure. Governments don't do that. We have the same style of government and we expect it to run in today's day and age. So I believe that it is going to be extremely difficult for governments across the world. That's what we do. We are good at tribal work and we are good at tech. So I think that is going to be always 1 or 2 steps ahead of governments and organizations.
Right. And just a corollary or a passing thought or a parallel to this, what you just mentioned that struck me is sometimes I think people these days have more of a sense of kinship to some kind of a virtual world, right? Now you are sitting in UK, I'm sitting here in Pune. Yes, there is a Pune connection as well for us, but I'm even if you are not from Pune, given how we've been interacting, I have a bond with you already.
Absolutely.
Right? And there are more people. Maybe somebody is in Estonia, somebody in the US, somebody in Bangladesh. All of us have that. So would that become more and more sort of prominent? People will feel more at home in the virtual world than in their real surroundings.
So if I was a conspiracy theorist again, Harish, I would say, what makes you feel that you're not in a virtual world right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would ask that question. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's a worthwhile argument. It is certainly a worthwhile argument. But if I have to discard that argument and if I have to stick to this being reality and will we find virtual interests later on, the interesting part, the word that you used is kinship. Kinship typically is used in a biological way to determine the bond between members of the same family, brothers, sisters. There's a bond of blood, okay? And that's a biological thing. Now you're saying you're experiencing kinship, okay, with people who are not connected by blood. So that's a very interesting thing, and that might be adaptation.
Right.
That actually might be adaptation, right? Because if I look at biological drives, you're looking at kinship. You're looking at something called reciprocal altruism. Okay, so I scratch your back, you scratch mine. That happens in animals, it happens in human beings, right? Then you're talking of survival, and you're talking of reproduction, right? Mating, right? So then these are drives. These are drives that are in us. But what you're saying is now we are kind of modifying kinship. Okay, we are modifying kinship to go beyond blood. So that is what I mean by adaptation. An
Right.
example.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
possible. Of course it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, when you're talking about, you focus on the sense of kinship, right? So organization culture is something that, people spend a lot of time and money on in trying to articulate, codify, and then, sort of
Yes.
start living those values and all those things. So what role do you think does the organization culture play in helping companies make the transition to a digital future?
I think first of all, stop all Zoom parties because they don't work. Okay, but I think if I have to look at it, I mean, from a serious perspective, if I have to look at organizational cultures, right? I look at culture as the evidence of human beings forming tribes and acting together as tribes. So uh, my feeling is that where where culture is right now is what is determining its actions for the future, but the future is different, so your culture has to be essentially different, which essentially means that I have to be very, very clear as a leader that my current culture is not going to work in an environment which is requiring adaptation. Now, as a leader, I don't want that because I want certainty. I have said I want to prove some profitability and revenues to shareholders. If some the leader starts saying ki biological drives are different, then they're going to get fired immediately, right? But so therefore, there exists a deep requirement for the marriage of leadership and culture as a phenotype, and an organization as an extended phenotype for all of this to work together. That doesn't exist today. That is certainly a project that I would be interested in being part of, because that is something that is going to determine our future. We should understand that organizations are illusions. They don't have life of their own. Culture is an illusion. It doesn't have a life of its own. It is a process of a tribe banding together.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So in fact, we've been, in the last 1.5, 2 years, a lot of companies have come to us saying, "Oh, suddenly we've gone remote. How do we do this? We've been doing these beer parties and all of that. So, how do we make sure that, so we first told them that, see, just because in the earlier days, it was very easy for you to sort of, corral people into a room saying, sometimes guilt trip them. Five of your teammates are going, you should also come and join this event or whatever, whether they liked it or not. But now you can't do that, right? People are more than happy saying that, no, I have other important things to do. So, and suddenly your physical environment has changed. What all you put in your, corporate headquarters, it's different. It's now my bookcase, my room, which is my physical environment, right? In some cases, my bed, in some cases, a hammock or something like that, right? So then, how do you still build that, sense of kinship? And this is actually a solved problem in other spheres, right? If you look at something like religion, we have that tribalism, whether it's a religion from any part of the world, right? You have the same thing of some mythology that is shared and propagated. There are some rituals which sort of bind people. Most rituals of any religion, you ask them, you try to like rationally, question why you are doing that. You don't have a reason. You're either trying to retrofit, saying, yeah, some harvest season hai, isliye ye karta hu, and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's been happening. So we do Diwali or we do Dashara or whatever, right? So we've been trying to get people to do this, where we sort of codify what they think is their culture, both in terms of how things are operating today and how would they want to operate it tomorrow at whatever level they want to go to, and then make this come to life, where we ask them to actually.
That's a great initiative. I think one of the reasons why I moved back to academics and to actually now teach across institutions was because I wanted to know, see, how do you know how to create for the future is when you understand what the future is going to be from humanities perspective.
Right.
So therefore today, I am connected with Gen Z and millennials in a much deeper way than what I was connected to, say, 10 years back. And that allows me a very different perspective on how organization should be built to cater to those, man. They can't cater to people like us.
Yeah. And that's a serious empathy problem there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people who are now trying to take decisions about work from home, hybrid and all, have never been in this situation where, they're in a, 2 BHK with two, 6-year-old kids struggling to do homework, and, you're now saying, oh, come back to office. How can they manage that, right?
Exactly. So I think that empathy is certainly, it's a result of a sort of acknowledgement to begin with, that people have different issues. The new generation is different from my generation.
Right.
Their value system is different.
Yeah.
So and then you get into empathy. I suppose.
First is to acknowledge. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and moving to the corporate world, how do you expect the whole corporate learning to change? You're now at the cutting edge of how things are changing on the college side.
Yeah, no, I did mention the requirement for lifelong learning. I think it's becoming more and more evident that people are going to find solutions of their own. Now, whether a corporate does so, supports individual employees, or individual employees find the answer, there will be solutions for both, from both perspectives. Right now, corporates giving solutions, they are teaming up with people who can provide learning solutions. Great educational institutes as well as tech guys are doing it. And I think that there is a certain charm to it. But I think the reason why that is consumed is also for the certification aspect. It's also, but having been part of organizations wanting to transform themselves digitally, understanding that they want digital education, especially marketing or customer experience or whatever, and having been part of initiatives like that, what I do recognize is that organizations need to think beyond the quarterly results. I think that is extremely important. But therefore, I have more faith in individuals taking action for themselves to become better in whatever aspect there is. I think the unbundling of education is what we are going to see, where a professor meets a student without any. It's like the music industry, So that is what is going to likely happen.
Right. And, do you see this happening across all kinds of skills / areas, or there are some areas which are going to adopt this much earlier than others?
I think all things digital are going to be at the forefront because people understand that, oh, I need to know this, right? But tomorrow it might be anything different. Of course, it's going to be driven by market demand. So you're not going to try and learn the guitar if you can learn, digital in that sense, because one of them is connected to your bottom line. The second is a hobby. I think that becomes extremely important for us to understand. So besides the digital aspect, I think there will be a requirement for management fundamentals for any person who is in the corporate area. Management fundamentals will change over time, because when you actually join any management school, you're still learning something which has been, Baba Adam ke zamane, Kotler Baba. So that is what is happening. So I'm not mocking them. I think there's a place for that. But the fact is that you will need to keep updating that.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I recently read some post on LinkedIn where this person had actually shared about a meeting with Philip Kotler, who's 90 plus, and the first thing that he said is, okay, tell me how AI VR is going to impact marketing. He was ready to change and learn, but it's sad that people are still trying to just study what he wrote so many decades ago, right?
No, it's amazing that a guy who's 90 has the motivation and drive to actually learn the latest stuff in his field, which is fantastic. Right. I hope I am like that if I ever live up to 90. Yeah, because all of us crave for a bus ho gaya sort of thing, and that's something that we need to fight against.
Right. Yeah. So, another interesting thing that struck me when you said, guitar is a hobby, right? So if you just do a rewind to 2 years ago, right, when people suddenly had to switch to the online way of working, and suddenly all these leaders had to now start doing these
Zoom.
calls and come up with inspirational talks, which were almost like they had to put on a show, right,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
rally their troops and,
Absolutely.
and all of that, right? So now, if you think about this whole idea of new media literacy, right, ability to use audiovisual as
Hmm.
well as issues like your fake news and all those things, right? It's increasingly becoming very important for both the consumer and the creator. So how should leaders, especially the older ones, a build these skills and b build this awareness that yeah, today it is AV, tomorrow it could be, like you said, VR and Oculus Rift or whatever. How do they build the skills and how do they build the awareness?
Okay, I think the most important thing for leaders is to actually be unafraid to make asses of themselves. Okay, because that is what is stopping them from trying to be more out there on, say, a Facebook or a LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever it is. And because, as you know, you can only do it by doing it. You can't have net practice in this game. Um, so that's one. However, my advice to leaders would be to take a look at the top 10 influencers in their field, okay, and learn from the way in which they are engaging. Because there's a reason why they're influencers, because they have the ability to actually look into the camera and treat it like a friend. And that's a very critical skill that most leaders don't have. They don't have it.
Hmm.
They don't have it. They're extremely conscious, and all of us are conscious in that sense, and so is the influencer. But the fact is that they know how to kind of manage that and still go and get through. I
Hmm.
think I would urge every leader to look at influencers in their field just to observe how they're communicating.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, when you mentioned that, the first question that we usually ask these leaders, they say, "Yeah, we want people, to have authenticity in our team and all that." We
Mhm.
say, "Are there any opportunities where the guy who's just joined your team and you can be placed at the same pedestal in the
Hmm.
company?" And they say, "No, actually," and that's what I miss, is what a lot of people also tell us, right? So, then we tell them that, yeah, you should probably just do a hackathon, or we'll do a quiz where you'll be equally at sea and, your fresher might actually be able to know more than you.
Sure,
And
that's
that's
a
where
good idea.
you'll get to know that, yeah, you're vulnerable, right? Because otherwise, especially in the smaller teams, the founder, co-founder is like the hero, right?
Or they remain the hero and accept that that
Yeah.
is authenticity. Kuch to, either that or this. But yeah, it's a great idea to
Right.
be involving people in activities wherein the CEO can literally be as all at sea.
Right.
It is a very important, vulnerable thing for the CEO to do.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've come to the end of this. A couple of things remain. One is the last section, which I'll come to later. But before that, any recommendations of books, podcasts, websites, influencers that help you stay future relevant?
Okay. So I believe in going to first principles. So if I have to study marketing, I study anthropology, I study biology, I study sociology, and all of that. So Robert Sapolsky's series, Stanford
Right.
series on evolutionary biology is very good. I would certainly look at reading around marketing or around business transformation rather than read about
Hmm.
business transformation. Loonshots is a decent book, I
Yeah.
think. But you know what? My problem with books is that they are kind of dated by the time they come out.
Hmm.
Yeah. So they're just dated by the time they come out.
Right.
So my feeling is that okay, how can I? So therefore, podcasts. So I like Freakonomics. I don't know if you've heard
Hmm.
Freakonomics,
Hmm.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
Freakonomics is pretty decent.
Hmm.
I like Theories of Everything, which is
Hmm.
done by a guy called Kurt Jaimangal, who's pretty good. Um, I like I like what else do I like? Yeah, I guess those are the things that I'm currently listening to. Otherwise, I'm just consuming a lot of junk, man.
All right, so let's come to the last section where we will ask for your hot takes
Hmm.
on some things. Where I'm going to give you a term or something, and I'm going to ask you for what you think is the future relevance of that. So, what do you think is the future relevance of podcasting?
I think building personal brand till the time virtual reality happens.
Okay, I think that's a very precise. It clearly shows that a lot of thinking has already gone into that, and this was not shared with you.
That's okay.
So, what do you think is the future relevance of colleges or university?
Diminishing, especially higher education. I think education is going to be bumped up. So, what you were learning in PG level, you're going to learn at UG level, sort of
Okay,
thing.
okay. What do you think is the future relevance of LinkedIn?
I think it's growing. It's a growing relevance. It's got set boundaries, which is good. Yeah, it's a very, very positive. At a deeper level, I think LinkedIn focuses more on activities rather than function personality. What I've done
Hmm,
rather
hmm,
than who I am.
hmm.
Because everyone has to be humble on LinkedIn. So I think, but that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. It differentiates it from Facebook or Instagram. So yeah.
Right. All right. And the final one. What do you think is the future relevance of Bollywood?
Bollywood. I think when I heard how Salman Khan's film was treated when it was released on OTT, you realize that unless and until theater exists, Salman Khan is not going to exist in the same way. So the reason why I'm taking his example is that is the connect with Bollywood. I went to see the latest James Bond film.
Hmm,
Okay, it was highly praised and all of that. I couldn't sit through it.
hmm.
So the habits are changing even before we understand that they're changing. And so therefore Bollywood is going to be OTT.
Yeah. On that note, Siddharth, I think what we've spoken for almost an hour. I have definitely become smarter with Sid, and
You're just too kind. The idea with Smarter with Sid is not that I'm making you smarter. We are all growing smarter by
no,
1%
this okay. This is the Smartcast. Let me take the
together.
whole credit for that.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
But yeah, this is fantastic, Siddharth. So thanks a lot. I think we covered a whole range of topics that we wanted to cover around future relevance, digital futures, how people
No,
should think about it. So
yeah, I've done a lot of podcasts, but this one really had some really interesting thought through questions and great follow up questions from your side as well. It obviously shows that you are in this field and you have thought through things, and the depth of the conversation also is an indicator of the fact that I'm talking to somebody who is in the know.
all right, thanks a lot. Thanks for those kind words, Siddharth. So that's it for now.
Okay, wonderful,
Yeah.
great. Okay.